We are back. It's the Joe Holka Show presented by Line Movement. If you're listening to this on the podcast later and kind of wondering where this video is, I have to remind you guys that this is the one video per week that is exclusively on the Line Movement YouTube channel. So make sure you guys check that out. If you're already here, welcome. Do us a solid. Toss a like on this video. Consider subscribing also, guys. There's a ton of live streams coming your way for a bunch of different sports right now. So make sure you hit the bell so you get notified along the way. Today is a great day. Every other week, we have our regular guest, Mike Tagliere, with us. We actually had an in-depth conversation about the slate just a couple hours ago on his podcast, which is always a good time. Today, we're gonna fly through the positions, give you guys what we think are the best plays on DraftKings for Week 5. But Mike, how's everything going, man? It's been a long time.
Yeah, no, it does feel like it's been a long time. I swear. I mean, 2020 has felt long enough, but sometimes these weeks with all the question marks that we have going through the week, sometimes it feels like a really long time. So yeah, even though it's only been 2 weeks since we really talked on your show, it feels like it's been a lot longer.
Yeah, Week 5 already. I feel like I keep saying that on each show, but it actually does. Like, the beginning of the season just flies by. So I think what we're going to try and do is grab some player that is a little bit expensive, some player that is a little bit on the cheaper side. We'll try and knock one of those out per position. So at the quarterback position, let's just start at the top, Mike. If you're paying up, who's it going to be?
Well, Lamar Jackson would have been the guy that I would have been talking about to pay up for, but he's now missed practice back-to-back days. We don't know what's going on. They're listing it as a knee injury. He would have been the one I would have gone to because you look at the Bengals, it's still the same defensive schemes it was last year. They do have 3 new linebackers there. They're missing one of their starting safeties. Geno Atkins hasn't been playing. There's a whole lot of injuries in the front seven too. So that would have been the matchup I would have been attacking because Jackson, he totaled more than 30 DK points against them in both matchups last year. This is a team that struggles both through the air and on the ground. But again, missing practice twice, it just doesn't make me want to pay up at the position. I'm going to end up avoiding Lamar Jackson altogether. It was going to be tough to get up to him anyways, like, to be honest with you, with the running backs that we want to pay for this week. So unfortunately, I'm probably not going to be paying up for any quarterback.
All right, who's the cheap guy that you like then? We talked about one guy in particular on the FantasyPros pod earlier today. He's still on him. It's been 3 hours.
It has been 3 hours, and that feels like a century ago. But yes, we're sticking with Teddy Bridgewater.
Yeah.
You and I were in sync on that one. If you look at the Falcons, they've allowed 32.5 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks so far. In fact, there hasn't been a single game where they've allowed fewer than 28 fantasy points to quarterbacks, and that includes Nick Foles and Mitch Trubisky, as they combined for, I think it was 28.5 or 29. 72.5% completion percentage, 8.5 yards per attempt, 7.8% touchdown rate. Everything is there for Teddy Bridgewater. And honestly, he's looked pretty good to start the year. He's only getting more comfortable, and it's really surprising to see him playing so well, considering they didn't have that offseason. He has a new receiving core. He has a new offensive scheme. He has a new team. Everything around him is brand new, and he hasn't even had the easiest schedule. If you look at it, the Raiders, 13th against quarterbacks. The Bucs, 4th fewest fantasy points against quarterbacks. The Chargers were in there. I mean, there were some tough matchups in there, and Teddy Bridgewater has come out smelling like a rose. So if you look at it this week, the Falcons obviously coming off a short week playing against the Packers on Monday night. Teddy Bridgewater at 5,900 just makes way too much sense.
Yeah, they've actually allowed 3 touchdowns on the ground to quarterbacks this year also. So good matchup if you think that Teddy's going to continue to use his legs a little bit more. He was just looking more and more comfortable in this offense. So love to see that. Let's move on to running back. And I think that at the top, we're very much in sync. There's not a Christian McCaffrey to pay up for, but it sounds like Zeke is the guy that you're on again this week. In this matchup against the Giants, hard not to like him.
Yeah, when you're paying up this far, you need a running back who's game script proof. There's a reason that you and I, whenever we talk, you're always like, I never play Derrick Henry, because you always have to worry about that, right? If there's a negative game script. And there's been a lot of those games this year, especially with the Cowboys, where it's like they were supposed to crush. Going back to that Falcons game, I think that they were over touchdown favorites in that game, and then they end up falling way behind. They fall way behind the Browns last week. I can't pretend that that's not going to happen. Fortunately, Ezekiel Elliott has run more pass routes than any other running back in the league, and it's not even close. Like, he has 33 more routes run than David Johnson, who's in second place on that list. So when you look at this game, you try and figure out game script, which is what we do have to project. This should be a 20 to 25 carry game for Ezekiel Elliott, chance at multiple touchdowns. And even if for whatever reason they were to fall behind, which is possible, I do like Daniel Jones quite a bit in this game, especially in tournaments. But Ezekiel Elliott, game script proofed, and that's what you absolutely need that when you're paying this much for a running back. Ezekiel Elliott in this matchup, I would say he should probably be priced closer to like 8,500 than the 7,800 he is. So he's kind of a lock in cash games right now.
Yeah, I love Zeke if you're paying up. And at the running back position, we're not usually dumpster diving too much. So I think a more interesting conversation is to talk about a couple of these guys in the mid 6K range. So I guess the big decision for me and for a lot of people is going to be Clyde Edwards-Helaire versus someone like, gosh, I'm actually blanking. Oh, Kareem Hunt. Why can't I think of Kareem Hunt's name? It's Thursday and it's already a long week, Jake. So between those two guys and then obviously Mike Davis in that mid 6K range, that's the range I kind of want to live in at running back. Do you have any preference between those three?
Clyde Edwards-Helaire is the one that I'm probably going to gravitate towards. I do think they're all good plays. I think Josh Jacobs is a good play too, but Edwards-Helaire has been seeing the majority of touches in this backfield. And eventually when you play for the Chiefs, you're going to score. It's almost like Tyreek Hill going 3 or 4 games without a touchdown. This is basically what we're looking at with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And then you go and you look at this Raiders team and you see they allowed multiple touchdowns to each of the first 3 running backs they played. They allowed a touchdown to Devin Singletary last week, who is allergic to the end zone by all accounts. So you look at the matchups and you say, this is a team that allowed 3 straight number 2 running back performances. I will say that probably 28 of the 32 teams will not ever get to that point over an entire season, let alone the first quarter of the season. So this is a smash matchup for him. The Raiders, again, they have a lot of problems in their secondary, and the Chiefs can pretty much pick and choose their battles and do whatever they want. But Clyde Edwards-Helaire has been getting the touches inside the 5, inside the 10, inside the red zone, whatever you want to call it. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a true 3-down back who has 17 targets over the last 3 weeks. So he's another one. Game script proof. You really don't have to worry about it with the Chiefs, but you have it if you need it.
Yeah, this type of team total, I think you would imagine that he's someone that could kind of see some positive regression in the TD column. So I'm with you on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think it's a little bit closer between Kareem Hunt and Mike Davis. I think Kareem Hunt, obviously, and not the best matchup against Indy, but I think that his usage should be really strong. It was a little bit concerning, I guess, to see a couple other guys cycling through. We talked about that a little bit more in depth on your podcast. So maybe people will go check that out if they want the full Kareem Hunt lowdown. But looking at wide receiver, I think one thing that at the top that we kind of discussed today was DeAndre Hopkins versus Amari Cooper. Any preference between those guys? I love putting you in the Amari situation because I know he's your guy.
Yeah, I love Amari, and I love the fact that he's been consistent this year. But you have to pick and choose your battles, especially if you're playing in cash lineups. Cash is a place that, again, if you're paying up, you need certainty. DeAndre Hopkins is someone that I do like, but I am worried about his health. We need to make sure that he's practicing the entire week before we put him out there in cash lineups, because last week he didn't practice at all, and he was someone that really did struggle. When you watched him on the field, he clearly wasn't 100%. So as long as he gets back to a full practice, I would much rather get up to DeAndre Hopkins. I think Calvin Ridley's in a smash spot here. I don't think anybody's going to play him, though, because I think if they're paying up, they're going to go to Hopkins. They're going to go to Amari. Amari's going to match up with James Bradbury, which is easily the toughest matchup against the Giants. They have him shadowing receivers. And it's not to say that Amari's not better than James Bradbury. He absolutely is. But when you can pick and choose your matchups and say, there is absolutely no other cornerback on that roster that I'm worried about, when I have CeeDee Lamb, I have Ezekiel Elliott, I have Michael Gallup, all those things matter. So when you're paying up, you need that production. And Calvin Ridley with Julio Jones out of the lineup should smash. So actually, I would rather play Calvin Ridley than both those guys.
Nice. Interesting. I was going to say we should go all the way down and talk about some of those 3K like Stone Min wide receivers, but the people that are listening to this now, they should just go check out the value plays video that I just threw up earlier today. I think the more interesting convo is what do we do with these Carolina Panthers wide receivers in the mid-range? I think that's the one that, like, do we go back to the well with DJ Moore? Do we kind of just jump on the coattails of everyone that wants to talk about Robbie Anderson? Where's your lean on that one?
They're probably both good plays, to be honest, but I'm always about fading the public on that one, where it's like if I can go opposite of what people are doing, and it seems like more people are starting to move towards Robbie Anderson. And I said a couple weeks ago, I read up the primer, and I read a paragraph on all these players, every player from every game, and I get to Robbie Anderson, and I say, why is it that every single week we feel that DJ Moore is a strong wide receiver 2, he's going to get volume, and then we get to Robbie Anderson, and we're like, yeah, you could probably play him as a wide receiver 3, when in reality, he's technically been the number 1 wide receiver in this offense. It's a new offense with a new quarterback, new scheme, all that stuff. So, but at the same time, DJ Moore, the skill set that he brings to the table, he is a very versatile wide receiver. He has been used a little bit more down the field, and the Falcons have been ruined against wide receivers down the field. I want to say that they've allowed the 3rd highest yards per reception to wide receivers to this point. There's not a bad matchup on the field for them this week, and that's why that's why we're attacking them with Teddy Bridgewater. So technically, you could just take Bridgewater and say, I'm going to get both pieces here, not even worry about it. Joe, you said on our show, you're like, I might just use this as an opportunity to go to someone else because you don't want to choose between those two, especially if you're in a cash game. You don't want to choose wrong.
Yep. I mean, choosing wrong in a cash game scenario, the way that the landscape is now, that might be the difference between you hitting that cash line or not, which is crazy. If you can't differentiate between it, there's a lot of good plays out there for sure.
Yep.
I'll say this, this game that everyone probably needs to get right this week is the Giants and the Cowboys. So if you're stacking up Dallas, whoever it may be, is there one guy on the other side at the wide receiver position that you really like? I think we're in line on this one also.
Darius Slayton, such a good play. He's run the 5th most routes in the NFL. Targets, he ranks 16th among wide receivers in targets. These are good marks, right? And then you look at the Cowboys, a team that was struggling when they lost Byron Jones, and then they lost Awuzie, their other starting cornerback, to the IR. He's not going to be playing in this game. Over the last 2 weeks, they've really struggled. Trayvon Diggs and Darrell Worley, those are the 2 cornerbacks that he'll see most of the time. Those guys have combined to allow 18 of 25 passing for 193 yards and 3 touchdowns in their coverage. Overall, the Cowboys team as a whole has allowed 2.32 PPR points per target to wide receivers, which is the best in the league. So when you combine the targets there, Daniel Jones is a guy that so many people talked about as a breakout candidate before the season. I was not aboard that. I said that he reminds me a lot of Mitch Trubisky, and I said you can go back weeks. I've said this for a long time now, but he does have matchups where he is going to explode. I think this is one of those matchups where it could potentially be that. It is a little tough because it's a divisional matchup. A lot of these teams put so much emphasis on this. The Cowboys may try and take the air out of the ball and just keep the ball on the ground. But Daniel Jones, the games that he has smashed are matchups like this against the Cowboys. So if you want to stack Daniel Jones, it's really easy to do. Darius Slayton is the guy that I would stack him. He'd be the first guy I would throw in that stack.
There you go. There's another guy, if you don't want to play Bridgewater, that you can play on the cheap end on the quarterback spectrum also. So tags, moving on to tight ends at the top end. A lot of people talking about George Kittle and that huge week that he had in week 4. Do you prefer Kittle or Kelsey if you're paying up at tight end this week?
I'd go to Kelsey. I mean, he's just too safe not to do it, right? Like Kittle, we have to worry about Jimmy G coming back. I don't know if he's going to play or not. It's not to say you have to worry about Jimmy G compared to Nick Mullins or CJ Beathard, but it's more about like if Jimmy Garoppolo does get back under center, do they take it easy? Do they not throw the ball a whole lot? Obviously, now we have Brandon Ayuk, we have Deebo Samuel. These guys are both getting it done. Jerick McKinnon's been an option. George Kittle's a stud. I'm not going to say he's not. I'm not going to say it's a bad play, but Travis Kelce has been the consistent, right? He's a guy that I think it was in last week's primer. I wrote over his last 35 or 36 games, he's had like 3 games where he has not posted tight end 1 numbers. So when you're paying up at tight end, that's what you need. You just need consistency. You have a floor. You need a ceiling. Kelce's also coming off a game where he was a disappointment, posting 3 catches for 70 yards. He doesn't have back-to-back bad games. That just doesn't happen. And if you look at the matchup against the Raiders, same scheme as it was last year, Kelce posted 7 catches for 107 yards and a touchdown in the first meeting. And in the second meeting, Mahomes only threw for 175 yards, but Travis Kelce still finished 5 catches, 90 yards in that matchup. So I think he presents the floor. You're getting him for a couple $100 cheaper on DraftKings. So Kelce would be my play.
Honestly, I think the rest of tight end is kind of a mess this week. Like I've gone back and forth at looking at like someone like Logan Thomas at 3,500, Ian Thomas for a little bit cheaper in some of these game environments that we like. Obviously, Logan Thomas has a different quarterback now, all of those things. I think the mid-range is actually pretty interesting. One of the guys you mentioned on the FantasyPros podcast earlier today was Eric Ebron. Do you want to expand about him a little bit? Actually, I'm pretty interested in him at 4K.
Yeah, Ebron is someone that if you're looking to save money, he makes some sense because none of those tight ends, once you get down in that range, are guaranteed anything, right? So usually we typically follow targets at tight end, but unfortunately, Evan Engram and Logan Thomas have been crap, and their efficiency has gone down the tube. It's difficult for us to say that that's going to straighten itself out. Eric Ebron has grown in his role with the Steelers. He's seen 3 targets in week 1, 5 in week 2, and then 7 in week 3. So we've seen his role growing. He's actually on the field a lot more than I thought he was going to be with the Steelers, considering how much 11 personnel they run, but they are using him. They're actually running him. He's running routes. He's 14th in tight ends in routes run. And then you look at this matchup against Philly and you say, Deontay Johnson and Juju Smith-Schuster missed practice yesterday. They're still dealing with ailments, even coming off a bye week. Even though they play, Darius Slay matched up with Deontay Johnson. You're going to have Nickel Roby-Coleman in the slot covering Juju Smith-Schuster. Those are not easy matchups. It's not to say they can't produce, but Eric Ebron, they had to move Jalen Mills from safety back down to cornerback because they have some injuries to their starters. So that basically brings in backup safeties. Their linebacking core is one of the worst in football, and that's why a lot of people always talk about in the NFL draft time, they need to draft linebackers, but they just never do it. So I think Eric Ebron is in a spot where he can produce, and really the Eagles have allowed 2.8 PPR points per target to tight ends. By comparison, the Cardinals last year, the one, that team that we were playing every single tight end against, they allowed 2.4 PPR points per target to tight ends. So this has just been a matchup of nothing but fun for tight ends, including Tyler Higbee, who is not even running routes, and he scored 3 touchdowns against his team.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one to kind of monitor ownership as it goes, but I like it. I think that game's interesting overall, and let's spend 1 minute on defense, and obviously we can't start without talking about, I guess, this Philly offensive line. I don't think it's going to be able to do much against this Pittsburgh front, so if you are paying up, I think it's pretty clearly Pittsburgh, but if there's a cheaper defense, obviously in a perfect world, we're trying to pay down for defense. I initially was kind of interested in Tennessee, 2,100, but we don't even know if that game's going to happen now. So is there anything on the cheaper side that you like this week? And if not, we can just get you out of here and just tell people to play Pittsburgh. I think that works too.
Playing Pittsburgh is definitely recommended if you can get up to it. I'm usually one for like playing the minimum defense, but I was burned so bad the other week just playing a 2K defense. I can't even remember who it was at this point, but I was burned, so it's like got a bad taste in my mouth. But looking at it, you want a home favorite is never a bad thing. Houston Texans are 2,600 against Jacksonville. We know that obviously J.J. Watt apparently got into it with Bill O'Brien. If there's anything that could bring a defense together, it's like firing your GM and your head coach and saying, hey, this guy sucked. It's about time that he's out of here. Let's show them that it was not the players. We're not the problem, guys. And rally together against Jacksonville, who that offensive line is not very good for Jacksonville. So you can look at them. You could look at the Jets at 2,500, but it's not I don't have a strong feeling about any defense this week.
I'm kind of with you. Mike Tagliere, everyone. Make sure to follow him on Twitter. He's at Mike Tagliere NFL analyst, obviously, for FantasyPros. I was just on their podcast, so make sure you guys check that out this week. Mike just writes this insanely in-depth article every single week called The Primer, so if you haven't checked that out, you're doing yourself a disservice at this point. The thing just literally blows my mind every week. Mike, always appreciate the time, man.
Oh, thanks for having me, dude. It's always fun talking DFS with you.
Good stuff. Let's talk to you later.